Welcome back, everybody. It is 7:24 just gone. Calling Muslims parasites, comparing Islam with fascism, and retweeting outright racist comments. These are just some of the allegations levelled against Conservative candidates and representatives in a letter that's just been sent overnight by the Muslim Council of Britain.
And they're claiming that just last month there were weekly examples of Islamophobic comments among party members. This is some of what they say in their letter. We are writing to you formally to request that you begin an independent inquiry into Islamophobia within the Conservative Party, including a full audit to ensure racists and bigots have no place within the party. Well, we're joined now from Wakefield by the Conservatives' most senior Muslim woman, Baroness Varsi, who has said, haven't you, that there is a simmering underbelly of Islamophobia within the party. That's a quote from you, I believe. Good morning to you.
Morning.
What do you think is the problem?
Good morning.
Hi.
Good morning. I mean, I've been calling now for nearly 2.5 years for the party to start an internal inquiry looking at this issue. Too often I started coming across cases of linked groups, candidates, councillors, even members of parliament, making comments, repeating comments, campaigning, which I considered to invoke anti-Muslim sentiment, anti-Muslim hatred. I sincerely hope that the party now feels that it can start this internal inquiry, because by doing so, I think what it will say is that we're not going to tolerate bigotry of any form in a modern Conservative party.
Well, what does it say about the party if it won't listen to you?
Good question.
Well, it's concerning, and I think this is one of the points that I've been making. I mean, I've now raised this issue with 3 successive chairmen. I wrote to the Prime Minister about this issue in October or November of last year, raising my concerns, asking then for a formal meeting, for an internal inquiry. I think, sadly, the party has in the past buried its head in the sand and hoped that these individual allegations will go away. But I think that the frequency of these allegations is now too often for them to be ignored, and I sincerely hope, and I'm convinced that Brandon Lewis, the current chairman, is committed to this, and I sincerely hope that an internal inquiry will now be launched.
How would you define this this racism, this Islamophobia, however you want to describe it? Is it kind of semi-organised, or is it sort of more on the level of barroom abuse, sort of uncoordinated insults, not really joined up, but just coming out of the mouths of men and women who have a problem with Muslims?
I think it's both, Richard, and part of the problem in this area is that there is actually no agreed definition of Islamophobia or anti-Muslim hatred. Indeed, government itself does not have an agreed definition. And one of the things that I've been involved in as part of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on British Muslims is to try and bring together civil society, community groups, victims, people who've been involved in this area, academics, to try and find an agreed definition of anti-Muslim hatred and Islamophobia. But in the way in which it manifests itself in my party, there are 2 parts to this. Yes, some of it is just individuals making comments which are offensive or inappropriate, but also I think, and I raised this at the time of the mayoral campaign, you will recall, in the way in which we campaign, the messaging that we put out. I mean, the appalling campaign that we ran in London in 2016, where we could have said so many things about Sadiq Khan, about his politics, about what he believed, about his campaigns, but instead we chose to focus on his faith. And again, I felt that that was inappropriate, and I called it out.
I remember that campaign, and I agree with you as a Londoner 100%. It was shameful, actually, and it was stupid, and it didn't have any effect because he won. What about you? Have you had direct personal abuse from members of your party because of your religion?
I've faced occasional incidents of racism and an anti-Muslim sentiment within the party over the years.
Hang on, Baroness Varsi, can you just describe what you mean by that? Can you give us an example of what you're talking about? A specific example?
Well, I mean, some of it was fairly overt, so the P word was used in a meeting. Some of it, I think, was based upon ignorance. Some of it was based upon a lack of understanding about people like me. You know, it was unusual for some people who weren't familiar with what modern Britain and communities in modern Britain look like. But, you know, I'm from Yorkshire. I'm an ex-criminal defence lawyer. I'm fairly thick-skinned. I chose to go into politics. I realised that the rough and tumble of it would involve sometimes offensive statements. I think for me, this is not so much about what I've faced. This is what's more important for me, is that the party is going to send out a really strong message that if you are British and Muslim and you want to be part of the Conservative Party, then you will be made to feel welcome, and that includes not being tolerant of any offensive comments being made by candidates and councillors and members of Parliament, and running campaigns which, as you said, you found offensive, but many, many British Muslims, Conservative supporters, members and donors at that mayoral campaign were repulsed and felt that they couldn't vote for a party whose values and actually politics they agreed with.
And there's, you know, over on the opposition benches, there's all, of course, for the last year or so been a huge problem with anti-Semitism, or at least the view that the Labour Party hasn't dealt with it quickly enough, or at least from the top it hasn't dealt with it properly, and that they may have suffered, you know, even in the local elections, you know, from Jewish members not wanting to vote that way. Do you think that the Conservative Party runs the same risk with Muslim voters if it doesn't deal with this the way the Muslim Council wants it to?
Look, I mean, Ranveer, first of all, I congratulate my party on calling out anti-Semitism in certain sections of the left of politics. But by calling it out, it's even more important that we get our own house in order. You know, if we're going to have the moral high ground on these issues, which I think we should have, then it's important that we say that all forms of bigotry are unacceptable, and that we will deal with what I think is this festering underbelly of Islamophobia within the party.
So are you calling?
It needs to be first called out. It needs to...
So, and do you agree then with the letter? I mean, you know, they're calling for a full audit, a full inquiry. I mean, do you support that level of inquiry and self-reflection within the Conservative Party?
Well, I'm really disappointed that it's come to this, and that there is now a call for an independent inquiry. What I've called for, and I called for in the letter to the Prime Minister last year, was an internal inquiry. What I was hoping, and remember, I've been raising this issue long before the issue of anti-Semitism within the left even rose its ugly head. So what I've been asking for 2.5 years is for my party to get ahead of this issue, to get its house in order, to have an internal inquiry, and to deal with it before it's become now so public and embarrassing. So I hope that the party will first of all start by stop denying that it exists, secondly by having an internal inquiry, by publishing and being very transparent about people who have been suspended and whether or not they've been readmitted to the party, and then sticking by our own pledge. I mean, what I do congratulate Brandon Lewis, the chairman, for is having this pledge to run clean campaigns, which includes respect and tolerance for everyone.
Right,
and I hope we simply apply that pledge to our own party.
Okay, final question. I mean, most of what you said in terms of what you'd like to see has been based on, if you like, a fond hope. I'm getting the impression that you're not 100% sure that it's going to happen. What would you say to Theresa May if you could speak to her at lunchtime today and talk to her about the way that Jeremy Corbyn has been widely seen not to handle allegations of anti-Semitism properly within Labour? What would you tell her specifically to do and to say in a statement this evening? What should she do and say?
I think what I'd like Theresa to say, and I know Theresa is somebody who is personally committed to equality for all, including religious minorities. What I would say to her is that she takes these allegations seriously, and it's why she's going to launch an internal inquiry, that she's going to make sure that she looks at the way in which we campaign and the comments that have been made, and that anybody who has been involved in this will be told to leave the party.
Right, so no denial, get to grips with it, and get to grips with it vigorously and openly. Simple as that. All right, thank you very much indeed. It's very good of you to get up early and join us down the line. It's always difficult talking at such a distance, but that went rather well. Thank you. Now, Yorkshire always looks beautiful, yeah. Now, then, a spokesman for the Tory party has told us this. We take all such incidents seriously, which is why we have suspended all those who have behaved inappropriately, and we have launched immediate investigations.